This is me on a bike. And this is me in a car. Now, if you've listened to the mainstream media and the angry people on Facebook, then you would know that it is physically impossible for me to like doing both. But I do. So there. When we talk about cyclists and or petrolheads, it's all too easy to start separating people into groups. And if we're honest with ourselves, that does none of us any favours. Whilst I do completely agree that there's plenty of idiots in both camps, the answer is clearly tolerance and education. So today's video is a little bit different because we've got the chance to talk to Jayemm On Cars, a popular YouTuber and an avid petrolhead. You can check out James's channel using the card up there, and if you haven't already, then subscribe to this channel for more interesting content like this.
There is a kind of crossover between cyclists and petrolheads. So, when you read all of the, when you read books about Pantani or Tommy Smith, all this kind of stuff, there always seems to be at the end of the race, and then they drove away in a really nice car, and then they had a crash in this really nice car. And there does seem to be this big crossover between people who love cycling and people who love cars. Like, where do you think that comes from? Do you think it's like the technology, the buzz, kind of the thrill of going fast? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think it's possible that it comes from quite a few different places. In basic terms, if you don't live inside essentially a major city, then you would almost certainly have had a car, to get you about. I don't know about where you guys live, but where I live, the bus is a story that we tell children to scare them at night. We have no public transport around here, so if you want to get about, you must have a car. And I expect that the same sort of people that would like to have a nice car, if they're going to have a bike, they would like to have a nice bike. I'm pretty sure there's lots of people out there who are actually just as obsessed by the machine itself. I would love a Lotus bike to go on the wall. I wouldn't ride it, but I would love to just look at it because it's a piece of art. As far as I see it, a lot of cars, they are a piece of engineering art, and a bicycle is no different, or a motorcycle is no real different. The benefit with something like a bike is that you can actually see much more clearly what's going on, how it all interacts. I think there's a lot of people out there, and I include myself, sort of in the fringes of this, that are just fascinated by the how it works aspect of it, and then a lot of people, and I'm sure there's loads and loads of people out there that have really, really expensive bikes who aren't actually very good on them, but just are self-aware. They know that, but they just love the beauty of it, the artistry of it. They love having something a little bit different to somebody else. It's a bit of a treat. I'm sure there's other people out there that also have it as a bit of a statement. I've noticed in the last decade in particular, when the people I know that are into cycling, the amount of money that you're talking about is now, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm sure there are people for whom they used to do the car thing because, 10 grand in the car world really get you that far, but 10 grand in a bike world, I'm sure probably gets you a bit further. I was going to say really far there, but I'm not that naive. I'm pretty sure like the amount of money you can spend on a bike is kind of unthinkable as well. Yeah. There's that, and of course, I think as you mentioned, like the thrill. I remember very, very vividly one weekend going to Donington Park. And after the racing was finished for the day, you're allowed to cycle the circuit. And I went down Craner Curves on the little bike I had at the time, which I think I still have, which is just a Claude Butler thing that was all about 300 quid or so, with big knobbly tyres on, and going down Craner Curves. And I got to about 45 mile an hour. And these tires were not meant for that sort of speed. And you're just going down. I had no helmet on. You're going down. The wind is in your hair. This thing's going. And I was thinking, like, I don't really want to try braking here because I suspect I will just go straight over the handlebars. And you're just flying down. I'm like, I think I had more fun doing that than I did tooling around in a car at 140 mile an hour. A couple of years later, and I'd spent a lot of time cycling as a kid because it was my freedom. Up until the point I could have a car or a motorbike, like that got me about, So Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for it. I think the notion, actually, to me, it's actually more of a surprise that people think that the two camps are exclusive
Mm.
rather than having the crossover that they do. And I think that actually is a London thing. I don't think that's a British thing.
Mm.
I think that's a London thing, and it's the same for motorcyclists. Exactly the same. Are you talking in London or out of London? Because you're in a London motorcyclist and you're out of London motorcyclist. They're separate species. Like, they are not the same. And your cyclist, I think, is pretty much exactly like that. I would wager, in London, 90% of cyclists are this way, and out of London, 90% of them are the other way. And hey, car drivers, exactly the same as well. So, and I think it's really easy to lose track of that fact, but people do.
No, I think it's different. I think because, for example, like in time trialing, because in that video where you were reviewing the Citigo that is no more, I think, am I right?
Yeah, the model's ended. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the guy who you are. So where you approach a guy on a bike, and you're like, why wouldn't you? I think you were just talking about passing distance, and the guy is a time trialist. He's got his head down, his hands in front of him, like Boardman would have been on that Lotus bike. But those people who are into there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. Actually, it's like, can we actually see where we're going because of this position that we're supposed to be in? But like, those people are just a lot of those people who are into time trialing and modifying their bikes to be as absolute aerodynamic as possible are just into machines. And Jamie is our in-house engineering expert, and I think I'm right in saying that you're very interested in F1 technology and car technology and what that means for cycling as well.
Yeah, I both
Jamie.
bike and like my cars, and I don't think that's by any means exclusive. So I do some cycling racing, and we often use car race tracks in the evenings when they're no longer got cars hooning around them. So Thruxton and Castle Combe are local to me. And after the race, you go back to the car park, and the amount of, I'm going to just call them nice cars that are there, and they're all pulling away. And they're not practical either. There's like Porsches with sea suckers on the roof to carry these bikes home from the races. And you'd really be better off with a more practical car. But obviously, it's that type of people that like high-tech machines in any form they come in. And it was one of the comments on that Citigo video that I think puts it really well. Let me find it a minute. It said, as a car nut and also a road bike fan, I applaud James's comments on how to overtake cyclists. Yes, there are bad cyclists and bad car drivers, but we're both out here to enjoy our respective passions. And I think that puts it really nicely. And then underneath that, couldn't have said it any better myself. The propelled road user enthusiasm, or enthusiastic road user, or just enthusiast, isn't there to wind up other road users, but just enjoy their steed on the Queen's finest, be it upon a carbon fibre layout road bike or vehicle. And I think that puts it really well of how...
Yeah, it does. The roads are a public service. Mm-hmm. They are for usage by everybody. My attitude always has been a live and let live one. And, honestly, like in the most brutally practical terms that I can possibly put it, I make a living now driving cars on the road and filming myself driving them on the road. So, in essence, if I want to continue leading the lovely life that I'm lucky enough to lead, a part of that involves not annoying other road users or, local inhabitants to the extent that they feel the desire to complain about me. I probably have too much of a social conscience to do the job that I actually do. And it bugs me, I think, more than most people when I see other YouTubers, revving up their engines in car parks, giving it the big one in a clearly built up urban area. It really frustrates. Yeah, I'm very particular about where and when I drive, as much as how I drive. We have a lot of cyclists around here. We have a lot of horses. We have, old biddies. We have new drivers. We have a little bit of everybody. I did have a very close family member killed in a road accident. So it is of particular concern to me that driving standards are fairly decent. And also, I've had more than a few near misses by people just engaging in driving that I don't think I can accurately describe using words you probably accept on the podcast. I mean, to give you one example, I was doing some drive-by shots of a little Kia electric car, an e-Niro or similar. And there's one little section of the road that I use. There's sort of quite a pronounced hump in the road. It's basically unsighted. And then shortly after that, there is a little lay-by. And that's where I turn around. So you have to be very careful. You have to be incredibly aware of your surroundings, because you know when you turn around that the visibility is reasonably limited. But before that, you'll have been able to see a good half mile behind you, so you kind of know nobody's going to, be surprising you. So I was coming over this little, hump, not bridge, but little hump in the road. And luckily, I was already slowing down. It's a 60-mile-an-hour limit, and I was probably doing about half of that. And as I crested the road, there was a guy in an old Mercedes E-Class on my side of the road trying to overtake two cyclists on a totally unsighted bend and incline. And had I not been already slowing down to turn around, we would have just come to blows. And he didn't even give the sort of, the cursory sort of, ooh, sorry, I did cock that one up a bit, didn't I? And that drives me nuts. I spend a lot of time, as I think I said to you in an email, I spend a lot of time standing by the side of the road. Every video of mine anybody's ever watched, the car's going past, everyone always thinks it's me driving the car. It's not. It's me standing by the side of the road. So I have a great interest in good driving standards, because I would like to not be killed by somebody not paying attention. And it shocks me the number of times people think it's the guys bringing me fast cars that can't drive. Completely the opposite. The number of shots I've got of somebody who's approaching me and I'm off the road. So I'm completely off the tarmac. I'm on the green bit. And they, move 3-4 foot over the white line to obviously give me some room, which is very kind of them. The only problem is that I know where they are. They're unsighted. So they've now placed themselves in the middle of the other side of the road to go around a bend for the benefit of me, who wasn't on the road. And I just stand there going, oh, no, please don't let them have an accident, mate, for the love of Christ. And I bear witness to all sorts of tomfoolery, and I think it's just a matter of educating people a little bit better.
So how do you do that? Because so say, like you were talking about the cultural thing with, the typical London cyclist who might be just totally anti-car entirely, and then the London driver who is like hates cyclists, hates anyone in their way. So I am this quite militant cyclist who just totally thinks that cars should be bad. And it's a huge exaggeration. But if I'm looking at your YouTube channel, and this isn't fair. This isn't me saying this.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, so you have a channel promoting, not promoting, but you're driving fast cars, and I'm looking at this saying, well, I think that you are emboldening those people. How would you answer that, and how do you try and spread the message that dangerous driving, like I said, revving your engine in urban areas, being irresponsible? How do you counter that?
So I think it's a really interesting point, because I attempt where I can to not get on my high horse. I think honestly, the absolute best thing that I can do is to lead by example. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this come into play over the last few years. When I started the channel, I had a few different principles, one of which was going to be that whatever it was that I had access to, I was going to drive with enthusiasm, but also respect. We're very lucky in Britain. We have actually some of the most generous speed limits in the world, certainly for country roads that I'm sure we all enjoy. A lot of the roads that here are 60 mile an hour in the USA would be a 35 zone, which is just frankly baffling until you see their driving standards. So I think I like to drive, and you'll see me in the videos. You have a sporty car; it'll be revved out on occasion. It's very important to me that when you see the cars being driven, you'll notice that there is virtually no traffic around because of the time of day, the location that I've chosen. If there is a cyclist or a horse or whatever, honestly, 99 times out of 10, I just slow down, wait till there's an appropriate moment, and that footage often either gets cut out or I make a mention of it, like I did in the Citigo video. But because of doing this and because of trying to be sensible, and no one's that stupid. If I'm out in a Ferrari or something and you hear me give it all through 3 or 4 gears, you know I'm going fast. And so I don't do that. You know, there's a heck of a lot you can do with the edit. It's more interesting trying to make cars exciting. I did have an issue. Some of the fast cars can be problematic. So I had a Ferrari 812 on loan, and I wanted to do a little section just so you can hear what the car sounds like. And the problem is that thing revs to near 9,000 RPM. And to try and make it roughly controllable, it's actually quite long geared. So, but it doesn't sound its best until it's at the top end of the rev range, and it doesn't sound its best until you've got your foot quite a way down as well. Now, because I don't really want to be doing 4th and 5th gear in this thing at top end, because that's not the police going to have a word view speed. That's, you know, you're going to be battered over the back of the head and dragged to jail speed. You had to do these things in 1st and 2nd gear, which, considering it was also a little bit damp and cold at the same point in time, you've got an 800 horsepower car, and I'm trying to drive this thing fast but slow but gentle but with throttle in 1st and 2nd gear, which doesn't even last that long. And so that's infuriating. But if you do it right, if you know what you're doing, you can make things look and sound exciting and dramatic without having to drive like a pillock. Actually, a lot of modern cars, you have the opposite problem, where you can drive them really, really fast and they don't look exciting or interesting or anything. My favorite cars to drive from a filming perspective are actually classics, because you drive, say, like a little turbo hot hatch up and down someone's house, and eventually they will come out and throw a brick at you. But you do it in an Aston Martin DB4, and they'll come out and go, "Oh, this is wonderful! Oh, the man who lived down the road 50 years ago, he bought one of those. Oh, wonderful chap! Oh, it's fabulous! I used to see it every day. Fantastic thing." And you just think, okay, yeah, it's just the type of car has changed. You know, you're still driving it like an idiot, but you're driving a car from 60 years ago like an idiot, which means actually you'll probably be holding a lot of people up now, including, I wager, the odd cyclist as well. And so, yeah, there are certain people out there who can and will always be belligerent. And I think of late, there's only been 2 incidents with a cyclist that have actually wound me up. One was when I wasn't even in the car. I was stood by the side of the road taking photos of a car, and it was in Los Angeles. And I was with another chap who's a fan of the channel who'd invited me to do some filming with his car. I was taking photos of the car, so we weren't even in motion. And this guy was going through a little gate, and the chap with me asked if this guy was there to open the gate in a sort of joking way. And we were greeted with a barrage of obscenities and colourful hand gestures because he was Argentinian. Which, I mean, I assume he was upset about a sort of little rock in the middle of the ocean somewhere, because I hadn't done anything else. In fact, I hadn't even opened my mouth at that point. I did find it personally a little bit humorous, because the guy I was with was Irish, and if anybody was going to hate English people by default, I think he probably got a bit of a better, cause for that. And the only other time, actually, and I'd be interested to hear your feedback on this one, was a piece I saw Jeremy Vine do, where he was cycling through London, and it was one of those sections where you've got 3 lanes, all tightly stacked, and there was a guy in an HGV just driving in the centre lane, and Vine and a couple of others were in the inside lane, and the HGV kind of passed him because he was doing a slightly higher speed, and Vine kind of went on this sort of tirade about this close pass and not leaving enough room, and how dare he, and he's going to be reported, and this is dangerous driving, and everything. And I just looked at it and I thought, this poor guy is driving a massive truck through the middle of London. I mean, he's got, one tyre on one white line, one tyre on the other white line. I mean, he's got no choice about this. It's London. That's what it's like. He wasn't out of control. He was in control of the vehicle. I mean, nobody was out of their lane. Nobody was in any danger. Nobody was wobbling about the place. Nobody got run over. But that just sort of, I just saw that and I just thought, we don't need that. That's the kind of stuff that sort of stokes division, rather than doing what you guys are trying to do today, which is kind of promote the inclusivity and the mutual understanding of the different groups.
Yeah, I think an interesting, because I've just moved from London, where I had all of these HGV instances, let's say, and I think one of the reasons why you get that kind of reaction is because it's shit scary being that close to a vehicle when you're on your bike, when you're that close to a massive vehicle. So I think that a lot of the time the logic of the kind of road planning kind of doesn't necessarily go out the window, but it is because it's a visceral reaction. You're kind of, it's like oh shit, what the hell? Like if I move, a meter to my right hand side, I'm going under the wheels of that, which is always a bit scary. But I think, so I don't necessarily, I think that the initial reaction is kind of understandable because there is that pure, monkey side of your brain reaction. But then potentially, I don't know how helpful it is then posting it online and making, kind of trying to make a thing of it. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Well, is it the fact that the sentiment was perhaps misguided, but what actually needs to happen is that in central London there shouldn't be HGVs and cyclists mixing, and the answer is better infrastructure. It is actually
it's just one of those things where it was one of those situations where I looked at it and I just thought the roads are not helping anyone there, for sure. As a car driver, being in London has gotten dramatically worse over the last sort of 10 to 15 years. I used to live in London 12 years ago, and it was at the right time of day just about tolerable as big cities go to drive through, at 2 a.m. in the morning. Now it's atrocious all the time. People have become more impatient. There is more provision for cycling, but there's also a lot of engineered conflict in the road design, which I don't like. We used to have, even the little town where I grew up, we had a cycle lane, and I used to call it the world's shortest cycle lane and potentially most lethal, because what it actually did was it took you off the road at the bottom of a hill and lasted all of about 8 or 9 feet, and then it turned you back onto the road.
Spits you back in, yeah. There's one of those in Bristol that turns you puts you into the path of a lot of buses, usually.
I spent a lot of time on a moped, and as a moped, you're in a sort of weird no man's land, because a lot of car drivers will think that you're as slow as a cyclist, but you're not. So, whereas a cyclist to maintain 30 mile an hour uphill, I would say would be doing pretty darn well. Whereas, a moped, you will do 30. I mean, just about everywhere you'll do 30. But people would do silly things to try and get past. And that I always found curious. The other one I find interesting, and it's one I may be tempted to do a video about at some point, is I see a lot of people getting really upset about cyclists going 2 abreast, which I'm sure is a popular topic for discussion. And that's always fascinated me because, living where I do, we've got country, little tight country lanes. They're not particularly wide. Yet riding 2 abreast all the time. And I think it's a genius idea. I think it's a brilliant thing to do, because car drivers around here don't know how to drive. They have absolutely no idea. They're the opposite to London drivers, like I was saying earlier. See, when I have people come to film with that live in London, I do have to educate them, because you basically have to tell them in sort of pretty direct terms, like, the drivers around here are essentially simpletons. They're not used to traffic. They're not used to having to barge their way in. They're not used to having to fight for space, which is a lovely thing to be able to say. We have the luxury of not needing to do stupid things to make progress. The downside is, of course, that people are unaware of the width of their car. Where Londoners or anyone in a city would get 3 cars in, we won't get 2 in, because everyone thinks their car is that much wider than it actually is. But what you also get is, I've had a few terrifying moments where I've been in a car with someone and they've gone to go around a parked car, and there was plenty of room for the oncoming car to also get past. But the oncoming car doesn't know that. So they just stay where they were. And I'm now in a car. You're like, we should be doing this, but we're about to do this. And that's terrifying. So actually, I like cyclists around here riding 2 abreast, because that way it makes road users, it might wind road users up, but only the simple ones, because they then know that they can only overtake when there's space. Whereas a single cyclist, people seem to think, for whatever reason, that it's easier to get past a single cyclist than people riding 2 abreast, or even worse, 2 cyclists in a row they think is safer to get past than 2 cyclists doing that. And in my head, I don't understand the logic, because the fact, as far as I'm concerned, if your car is over that center white line, you're on the other side of the road. Like,
Yeah.
full stop, you're on the other side of the road. Now, and if you've got visibility, this is fine. But a lot of the time, they don't, or they don't have the visibility that they think they do, and their engine is maybe lacking a few hundred horsepower over what they think it has, because it takes a painful time for them to get past, particularly if it's a competent cyclist who's already carrying quite a bit of speed. And I've had a number of arguments exclusively with car people about this, where they don't seem to understand that their car being a foot over the white line, they may as well have the whole car over. And so it's one of these, like, it's just one of these things where I smack my head against the desk.
Is it that they don't understand, or is it the principle? Because we've got an article, we have a couple of articles on this explaining it over and over again. And like you said, you go round in circles with people and say, like, yeah, but it's not as much distance. You're going to get past safer and quicker. But they're like, no, but it's still wrong. And you're like, why? I'm like, it just is. They don't like the principle of it.
I generally say to people, like, if it was a tractor and not a cyclist, would you have gone past them where you did? And I wager half of the time people would say no. And this is, I think, ultimately, and you know, in all the stuff that I do, I try to maintain a sort of fairly balanced philosophical approach, because the fact is, if you drive on the roads enough, it can wind you up. You know, be it as a walker, as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, as a motorist, as a motoring journalist. You use the roads for long enough, and you will see some absolutely idiotic behaviour that will just make you question why we're allowed to have any nice things. And you can either, as far as I see it, you can either let this get to you, and you can become angry and enraged, and you can become one of these people that just, you know, thinks that they do own the road. Hello, Florence. Thank you. Yeah, cheers. This is the star of the channel.
I think I could hear him typing. Actually, I was wondering what that was. Was that the cat on the keyboard?
No, that's probably the. You're not being paid for this. Come on, down again. Thank you.
I've locked my cat out.
You can either let this really wind you up, and you can become angry and annoyed at everybody, in which case that's really dangerous, because you should never be on the road in any form angry. Or you can take a more zen approach about it. I'm really lucky. Generally speaking, I don't have to get anywhere in a particular hurry. You know, I have places that I go frequently. I know how long it takes to get there. I think it helps that I had my film background, and that was an industry where being on time is not a concept that exists. You're either early or you're late. There is no such thing as being on time. So I'm habitually early to everything. And so I leave plenty of time. And the fact is, if somebody's being a little bit silly on the roads or whatever, I just kind of just chill out and just, I'll be able to get past them. I'll be able to get around them. Like, it's, I think getting yourself out of danger is a skill that's too rarely demonstrated. If I will have it a lot when I'm out driving, and you get someone coming behind you and they're being a bit of a moron, I just pull over. Like, I don't care. I really, really don't. And there's no need for it. But I don't know what it is about the roads, but it does animate people quite a bit.
It's interesting because so where I've just moved to, I've got quite a famous car cafe, like literally a 3-minute drive up the road from me, called Caffeine and Machine. So they've got,
I know it.
Also, I'm about 3 minutes away from there right now. So you get, every weekend you get these amazing cars that drive there. They have pilgrimages from all over the UK to get there. So I experienced cycling a lot around these super, but essentially supercars, all the time. And generally speaking, it is those people who are the ones who I'm least likely to find issues with, the ones who are, and it may be because they're doing this thing where it's like, we're just going to a cafe. And it may be because of that, what we just kind of discussed before, that there probably is quite a lot of crossover between people who are really into their cars and also really into their cycling. But yeah, it does generally tend to be the kind of people who are just driving something which is a little bit beat up, hasn't had a lot of love in terms of little bits hanging off it and questionable MOT status, that generally tend to cause the problem. So, I mean, I wonder if that has got something to do with it. You know, the more you're into cars, actually, the less likely you are to probably have an
Oh
issue.
yeah, I would think so. I think from you've got one perspective, which is that a bit of selfishness of like, no, I don't want to have to clean your spokes out of my Lamborghini's paintwork,
Yeah.
you know. And like you say, I think that there's also a lot of people, and I've actually seen this quite a bit recently, where I think cycling, triathlon, that sort of stuff, it's quite the pursuit for the well-off.
Mm.
I see a lot of people out, especially stuff like Ironmans and the like. I promised I'd give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Simon, who runs a firm called Phase on Triathlon. He's the gent I sort of said about the podcast. I said, are these guys going to try and sucker me into saying something stupid? And he said, no, they're good, honestly. So a big thank you to him. He's a friend of mine who
Not
actually
finished
rode
talking
the
yet.
Lotus bike.
Yeah.
So he's lovely. We've been friends for a very long time, and he was into his cars, and into his cycling and triathlon and whatnot. And it's down to that, and it's very clear that this is a sort of, because let's face it, doing a lot of this stuff. I mean, training seriously for anything takes time.
Mm.
A lot of time, a lot of dedication, and to be able to afford that time generally it probably means that you can afford the free time, which for a lot of people, I mean, I remember walking through London once ahead of a meeting, and there was a bunch of people in Hyde Park doing yoga at 10 a.m. On a Thursday morning or something, and I would wager most of those people probably weren't on lower income. Not because doing yoga is expensive, but just because doing yoga in Hyde Park at 10 a.m. in the morning on a weekday probably means you've got a lifestyle that allows you to do that as a luxury thing. And so I know a lot of people that have got very nice cars, and hanging on the wall is a very nice bike. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have very nice boats. I mean, speaking of one like potential crossover, there is a car that I'm desperate to get my hands on, but I don't think they'll let me. A few manufacturers have heritage fleets, so older cars. And one of the best in the country is the Jaguar Land Rover Heritage Fleet. And I know they had, and I suspect still have, the Team Sky support vehicles.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And they're all still done up in the livery, which is probably why I wouldn't be allowed to drive it, because I'm not sure they're a sponsor anymore. So they're probably like, oh, we can't really do that because Sky will shout at us. But I remember seeing that, and I was like, yeah, the Team Sky cars. I was like, that's really cool, because that's quite an iconic car. You say just another example of like a tie-up between Jaguar, luxury brand, and cycling.
Yeah.
Nice high-end activity or not. It's got a low point of entry, but every hobby these days, it would appear you can spend a fortune on. My other half does Dungeons and Dragons, and you would think that a hobby that involves a bunch of people talking to each other and making up stories couldn't possibly cost any money. But if you want to, you can spend on it. So yeah,
there's a crazy stat that Tony, who owns the company, mentioned. I don't know. I have no idea if this is true, but I'll say it anyway. But there's a stat that cyclists statistically own more cars than the general population, which I guess just hammers home the point that that cycling is an enthusiast thing rather than a transport thing. Crosses over so much more than we'd imagine.
Yeah, no, I think I could believe that one. I'll buy that. I'm not sure it's maybe a significant difference, but yeah, I think it's I'll go with that.
It may be true.
I've been trying to get back into cycling myself. I actually had a company who shall remain unnamed get in touch with me about a year or so ago, and they said, "Oh, we've got this electric bike. Would you like to try that?" And the problem is, when I moved to where I live now, there's a very big hill either side, and I'd got quite out of practice. And it's a big enough hill that I'm like, I don't want to go I wish it was the other direction. I lived at the bottom of the hill, but I don't. I live at the top. So you basically start off with a nice, really easy bit where, you can basically, one pedal and you'll be about half a mile away, but then coming back, not so easy. So, these people said, "Oh, we've got this electric bike," and I said, "Yeah, all right, I'll have a go at that. That sounds interesting. Like, ease myself back in to doing this." And then they sent it out, and I had it for about a month. Didn't really use it. Used it a couple of times, and then they emailed me and said, "Oh, have you done the video on the bike yet?" I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, no, I haven't yet." They said, "Oh, good," because it turns out they've been breaking in half. So I've got this giant paperweight in my garage that I need to send back to them. They're like, "Yeah, there was a sort of slight error with the construction, and they've just been snapping in two." And I was like, and then they offered me another one and said, "Hey, we fixed it. Do you want to try this one?" And I'm like,
Maybe not.
I don't think so. Probably not. And I don't know if you other guys. I should probably give a mention to Petrolheads, who's another motoring YouTuber, and he's very big into his cycling. As I know, is Joe Achilles as well. So I mean, you've got at least two YouTubers now. I mean, Joe I think did a lot of cycling stuff when he's younger. Matt Armstrong, who's recently his channel has exploded. I mean, he was a BMXer. Which I know very little about his BMX career, but he was cycling before he did this stuff. So I think for a lot of people as well, it wouldn't surprise me if you find that both the cycling and the cars is something that people get into as they get a little bit older. You do a lot of cycling and stuff when you're younger, you have quite a bit of free time, you tart about with cars and the like. Then, work comes along, life comes along, free time goes away. So the things you did in the free time go away. Then you hit, 40, 50, whatever. And you've got the free time, or you've got the money to buy you the free time. And you decide to buy the car, you want a 911 GT3, but you also want to go cycling. So that's why you see people with the sea suckers on it, because they've got the money and they go, well, yeah, once upon a time, $5,000 for a bike would have been like, who are these millionaires floating about? And then one day, I guess someone wakes up and goes, oh, it's me. I'll go out and spend a load of money on a bike. I remember being in Italy for the launch of the Ferrari Roma. And I hadn't been to Italy for like 16, 17 years. And everyone tells me, the Italians, they love cars. They love cars. They're mad for cars. And I thought, yeah, I keep hearing that. But, times have changed. I'm sure times have changed everywhere. And I was pulling up to junction in this brand new Roma. And these two guys, and they were the full lycra clad everything, doing all of that. They're coming down the hill. And I thought, okay, all right. Here's the ultimate test. I'm in the brand spanking new shiny Ferrari on the dealer plates and everything. And they're there. And in a minute, I am going to have to get past them as well, because they're going where I'm going. I'm like, oh, no, this could go horribly, horribly wrong. And as they're coming down the hill, they go, hey, Ferrari, hey! They're just the full, comic book Italian stereotypes. And I was like, oh, okay, they do like these cars. I actually think in Britain specifically, a lot of the time when you see and it's not just cyclists, I just really don't think it is. I think it's not an anti-cars thing. People have a real problem with other people having money. Don't know why. Really don't know why. I think cyclists probably get away with it because nobody could conceive that you could spend $30,000 on a bike. So they probably see someone out cycling one day and they probably think it's like my dad's old race bike from the 1980s that I still think is really, really cool, but it's probably worth about, scrap value. But, someone sees a flashy car and they, the British, they just think, oh, you prick.
Yeah.
I don't know why they have to do that. It's a real shame. I know a lot of people that would love to buy like a old Aston or a Lotus or something, it's a 25, 30 grand car. In the current scheme of things, that gets you a Fiat 500 electric. That's not a flashy car, but turn up as something with an Aston badge, and I think people just they have a bit of an issue with it. I think that's a shame, really. I think we should be encouraged to have nice things. I like seeing these cars about. They're rolling sculptures, if nothing else.
Very true.
I was filming once on a road that I use a lot, and I pick my roads. There's no houses, so when people drive past me, they can give it a little bit of throttle and not try and upset anyone. And I stood by the side of the road, and I was waiting for this car to appear, and there's this gentleman. He must have been mid-50s to early 60s. He had the Lycra on. He wasn't there. He was up here, and he was cycling along, and he saw me. And I was like, oh, no. Because I thought, right, he obviously lives along here. This is his cycling route. He's seen me appear a few times. He's seen noisy cars go past, but he's never quite managed to catch me. But now he's got me, and I can't really do much because I'm stood on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. So I was just getting ready, and I was like, oh, no. Oh no! I was like, I just whatever he says, I just nod. I'll apologise. I'll agree. Sorry, sir, and we'll all move on with our day. There's no point getting into an argument with him. And he comes up and he says, "Oh, love your channel. Oh, brilliant work that. Yeah, it's fantastic." And I was filming a TVR that day, and then this noisy old TVR come past. He's like, "Oh, that's great. I really like that." And I was like, "Huh." To this day, legitimately, to this day, I've had one cyclist shout at me while I was actually filming, ignoring the Argentinian gentleman. And I wasn't driving. It was a friend of mine. He overtook someone he shouldn't have done. I told him not to do it, but I evidently told him too late, and we got a much-deserved, two-fingered salute in return. But I have yet to ever have a cyclist actually be belligerent towards me just in my normal day-to-day. It's never happened. Horse riders, I'm not going to get invited on any horses soon. Put it that way. It would appear that some of them have decided that no matter how much of a concession you give them, it is not enough. And they act like they own the place, which unfortunately around here, sometimes they do.
Yeah. I found that.
If ever you're in a situation, this is general advice for everybody listening, right? Okay. The thing about British people is they're incredibly easy to disarm. Okay. So if you're in a situation where you think that things might get a little bit awkward, or, for me, if I'm filming as a noisy car and, you got your potentially belligerent militant cyclist coming towards you, with this, here's your headline. One easy trick will diffuse any British person. Use politeness. It's coded in. I think it's genetic. You just basically get someone's really angry. You go, "Good morning," and they just go, "Morning," and then they're gone. They're diffused. That's it. They're deactivated. Whatever they're about to say, whatever rant they're about to go on. If you just approach them straight away with, "Hello, how are you doing?" They don't know what to do with that. Like, they're thrown because they're expecting a fight. You see, but you be nice to them, and it's programmed into us. Like, you have to be nice back. It's just a thing. So I don't know. It might not work all the time. Please don't tell me you tried it at your local skinhead pub and it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, like, that's why I was very happy to come on today, is because I would just, like everybody out there, to know that, not all of us car drivers are dickheads. Like, we got some, we have a few. We're not immune.
We've got some too.
Yeah, we've all got some. And I think the sooner the world starts going like, yeah, you got some, we got some, they're a bit silly, aren't they? Like, we'll all get on so much better.
Absolutely.
Like, we just will. I want to keep enjoying the roads. And if respecting other people on the roads means I get to enjoy my roads for a little bit longer, like, that can never be a bad thing, can it? Surely.
Yeah. Jay, on that, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Pleasure. We'll have to talk about bicycles next time.
Well, I don't know about you, but I, for one, could have stayed talking to James for hours. Let us know your thoughts on how to improve the relationship between motorists and cyclists down in the comments below. And if you haven't already, then subscribe to this channel, give us a like, and we'll see you next time.